Welcome to Business Unboxed, where we dive into entrepreneurship, business life, and all things career. I'm your host, Kelly, an accountant here to make business chill, real, and fun. Let's get unboxed. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Business Unboxed, your go-to business podcast. I hope that you have enjoyed the new intro that we've got in this episode. I'm trying to make slight improvements as we continue to grow this podcast, and like I said in the last episode, if you had listened to that, there is some really exciting things coming. So if you're excited to learn and grow as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as much as we are in this podcast, then definitely subscribe and follow along to see where we go, and we can help you grow as we grow. So this episode, as you can tell from the title, is going to be some common mistakes that entrepreneurs make and maybe how we avoid them, or extra things that we need to look at and do in that planning process. So we're going to get straight into it. Again, I do have some notes off to the sides. If you see me looking over there in YouTube, then that's why. And I do have my microphone over here. So the first thing is obviously a lack of planning. So to start a new business or think of a business idea, there's a lot of planning that needs to go into it, and a lot of mistakes are made because not enough research was done, or they didn't plan enough at the start of their business idea process in order to figure out if it was going to work, or if it was a sellable product, or all these different types of things. So a couple of those might be things like not doing a business plan, or not having a good enough business plan. Now, if you are a regular listener of the podcast, you would know that I'm an advocate of some different business plans. So I don't think you do need that big, long, detailed, there's templates out there that are freaking 50 pages long, and I'm not an advocate of needing those as such, but I do like things like the business model canvas. So just some way that you can properly plan out your business. Like, how are you going to make money? How are you going to reach your customers? What core processes do you need? What kind of support people do you need? All these different really basic things, like what channels, how are you going to reach out to your customer? Who is your customer? All that kind of stuff all kind of rolls into the process. So if you are in the process of planning a business, definitely, find your way of planning out how it's going to work, whether it's that big detailed one if you want to go into that much depth, or if you want to start with a business model canvas to jot some of those base ideas down and then work on those and maybe expand those out, then that could also be a way. But definitely put some importance on the plan of the business. Don't just get straight in without really thinking it through, because when I was doing my CA study, so for those that are new around here, I am in the process of becoming a CA or a chartered accountant. There are other ones, a lot of people might hear of CPAs. It's all kind of the same kind of thing, where you just a more verified accountant, I guess. And so part of that process was learning, I guess, about the business model canvas and also some of the most common mistakes or problems. And so one of those is, for instance, this is just a really plain example, you might have in your customer list, if you've seen the business model canvas or not, I might be able to put an image up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, of what it looks like in the different categories. If you're listening, then essentially there's 9 different categories of things that you should really list out and plan. So for instance, customers, you might have them as being 50 plus or something, that might be your target market. They're just a slightly older women or men or whoever. But then the channels, you might be I'm going to reach out and I'm going to create a TikTok, and that's how I'm going to find my customers. It's going to be my main source of channel. And what we don't realize is your target customer may not be actually primarily operating on that platform or that channel that you're using to reach out. So you've come up with a plan that essentially is going to fail because your target customer isn't even a big user of that channel that you want to use to reach your customers. So it's things like that we really have to be careful of, and making sure that we're linking things through properly. So that's just one example there. Forecasting. So another big mistake in the planning process is not actually thinking through the money side of things. They want to think through some of the other things, like the fun things, like, oh, what products am I going to have? But we need to think through some different scenarios of forecast. Now, you might be able to get an accountant to help you with that, or if you don't have that money, you might know of somebody that, you know, has a little bit more financially savviness, and so you can reach out to them. Ideally, I think you should have like a worst case scenario, maybe like a probably going to happen, and then a best case scenario and some base numbers, because what you think might be like successful in your mid ground might actually end up being pretty bad. So it's always good to have like a, what is the worst case scenario? Maybe you only sell 2 products in your first month or 2, and if you can't survive off slowly growing, then that's something you want to plan for in advance of starting the business, instead of maybe spending more on other things and then you're like, crap, I haven't sold as much, now I don't have the money. So definitely think that through. And we'll move on to the second note, which is underestimating costs. So I've personally been there before in a business that I had. So I had a business with my brother and his partner. The 3 of us had a business that was in the furniture space, furniture, home and living kind of style space. And this is definitely something that we did, and we tried to plan it out as best as we could. But there's just things that you don't think about, or you don't realize are going to cost that much money. We thought we had planned it out, but obviously these things just happen. So there's always going to be hidden costs. So whether that is marketing or technology stuff or compliance stuff, in our case, it was the import fees to get our stuff into the country. We'd done some calculations, and based off the GST portion, which was my understanding at the time, was what they got charged as customs to bring stuff into the country. And I'd worked out based on the price of the goods that we were bringing in, times obviously the 15% of GST, as roughly what our customs fee would be, and it ended up being a few grand more. And we ended up having to get a little loan for it because we didn't plan for it, and it was just a mess. So just try and think about everything that you could possibly need. And if you are a regular listener of the podcast, you'll know that I do have a business kind of in the works-ish. And so I am having to try and think of all these little things that I hadn't thought of, that I need to make sure I'm included in my budget and make sure I have enough money up front to start a business. Because some people may say, oh, if you're starting a business and you get to the point where you're ready to launch and you don't have any marketing budget, or you don't have any money to market your product at all, your business, then you probably shouldn't be in business. Now that's a wee bit harsh, but also I see where they're coming from. Because if you're a brand new business with a brand new name, you don't have a big following like, you know, the celebrities or the influencers, whatever, to bring you in those sales immediately when you start a business. You need, like, how do you expect your people to find you? You need some marketing, and you need a marketing budget. So whether you know some people in that space, or whether you do some research in that space, if you are part of some sort of a group, you know, like entrepreneurs group, or those kinds of, I can't think of the word off the top of my head, but you know the groups that I'm talking about, where, you know, you have a bunch of different business people or entrepreneurs in a group, and they might be experts in different areas, and you can kind of help each other out. Then maybe you can ask them, or that kind of thing. Compliance is another thing, like anything to do with food normally has some compliance costs definitely associated with it, because, well, they need to make sure your kitchen's up to spec and all this other stuff, and food and the packaging needs to be really specific about ingredients and all those regulations. And so definitely do some research in that space, or talk to somebody that's in that space that can try and give you a little bit of help. The next thing is ignoring market research or doing minimal market research. Now, I definitely am not one who, when you have a business idea, you want to go out and spend hours and hours and hours scouring the internet for your competition, and then you're like, oh, like my idea isn't as unique as what I thought it was, or like, how do I make my product stand out compared to all these other people that have these amazing products, right? But that's where you really do have to do that market research. You have to find those people. It may feel like some of the sparkle of your product or your service is taken out a little bit because you realize maybe it's not as unique as what you would have liked. But that's part of creating a business, is finding who is out there, like who's doing the same thing as you, who's selling the same products as you, so that you can actually create a better marketing plan and create some sort of customization or something that makes you stand out. Like, what is your selling point that would make people come to you over those competitors? That's where the real fun and the real grit of starting a business comes in. Yeah, you can get your products, that's the little things, is figuring out what you want to sell, or if it's a service, what like we want to provide. But the real fun of it is really coming up with that core strategy and like values and stuff, and your mission behind your business that is unique to you. That's where you really get that sense of like ownership over your business, and that funness of being like, no, I am creating something special, and this is my special selling point that nobody else has, and this is just for me, and I've created it because it's me, and that's the real good stuff. So definitely you can't get to that point if you don't do the market research. There definitely are people out there that can help you with that, because it is quite overwhelming to scour the internet and try and find competitors that are doing the same thing as you. And so you can pay somebody to do it, or sit there for a few hours and just work through it. I'm sure if you Google how to do it, maybe there's some steps, because it's definitely quite an intensive process. I've done it before, probably not to as much detail obviously as a professional, because it's not my area of expertise, but somebody in branding or that kind of thing should be able to help you do that as part of that branding positioning section of starting up your business. Number 4, cash flow. So if you don't have enough cash flow, you're not managing your cash flow in a small business. That's why a majority of businesses go out of business. That was a lot of me saying business, but that essentially I think is like the number one cause of small businesses not running anymore, because they don't have the money. So this is kind of like a two-parter. Obviously you need enough startup, so that's part of what we kind of discussed in that planning phase. But there's also the part where once you are selling products and you have that space where you're able to start bringing in some money, you might start increasing some expenses. You might be like, oh, this is a nice wee thing. I've been doing it manually, but I found something that I can pay them $30 a month and they can do it for me, or they can do half of it for me, so it saves me time, because that's what you want to improve things like that. But if we don't manage how we're looking, or if we're not monitoring it, you might get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't have any money to pay all these bills. I've racked up all of these bills. I don't have enough sales this month to actually cover it. I was doing really well for a few months, but now winter's hit and maybe people aren't spending as much. And you're like, but I've committed to all of these things, so how am I going to manage that? So that's where having, try and get some strict payment terms. So you've got to decide when you're starting a business, how do people pay me? Obviously, product-wise, they should be paying you up front. Service-wise, a wee bit more complex. You could do deposit and then you pay some after, or you could do, you've got 7 days to pay, or it could be 50 up front, 50 once you go to deliver the goods or deliver the service, or there's all these different ways. Or it could be the 20th of the month, 30th of the month. you've got to figure out what's going to work from you, and then also factor in that not everybody's going to pay on time. As much as you would hope and you would like people to pay on time, it's probably not going to happen. Not everybody's going to do that because it's just the reality of it. And some people may even debate the cost, or even if you've given them a quote, there'll still be people that argue with it and don't want to pay for it. So just be aware of that and have some sort of way that you can track that. So whether that is a spreadsheet or whether your accounting system has a way that you can monitor the ins and outs and the timing of that, and any flows or days of the month where you go under zero, or talk to your bank and see if you can get an overdraft. Like, just plan it out and have it quite far in advance so that you are seeing maybe the trends, or just popping in when different things come out during the month and when your sales are, and try and track maybe if you've been in business for over a year or a couple of years, see if you can see those flows where maybe certain months are slower or some months are higher than normal, and factor that into your cash flow management plan. So you know, like, oh, I'm expecting less these months. That means when I am making some more these months, I need to put a little bit extra aside so I can cover it when I'm getting slightly less sales. So just monitoring it and putting the effort in. I know that a lot of entrepreneurs don't like that finance side. They don't like being bogged down, but it is really important. Part of it is to monitor that until you're big enough that you can get some people in to maybe do that for you. At the start, it's still something you need to pay attention to, even if it's boring and you don't want to. If you want to be actually successful and be a really good entrepreneur, that's just something you're going to have to deal with, unfortunately. Moving on to number 5, which is failing to define a target audience. So the biggest thing that I see, and I've spoken to my brother about it, who is in branding and graphic design, and he has done a lot of branding for different people. And the thing that just comes up most often is, I want to just appeal to everyone. And that's just not something that can be done. Everybody is so different and so unique, and there's so many different groups of people, but you cannot appeal to everyone. That's just not possible. And so trying to create something that appeals to everyone isn't just going to work, because it's just going to appeal to nobody, essentially, or it's not going to appeal to the people that actually want to buy your product. So that's where, in that planning phase, I mentioned the business model canvas, and one of the segments is customer. And so you want to make sure that when you're in that planning phase and you are, defining your customer, you've done some research on what your products are, what your services is, and who might actually want to use those. Also, when you're writing in your channels, who are the users of those platforms? If you want to use TikTok, who are the users on TikTok? If you want to use Facebook or Instagram, or if you just want to do ads somewhere, or billboards or radio, who are the primary listeners or viewers or consumers of those services or channels? And that's going to get you a better way of organizing that. Because, target audience, sorry, but trying to appeal to everyone just isn't going to work. So you really have to sit down and figure out who it is. Even if that means, if you're part of like a group on Facebook, doing a little bit of research on there and being like, okay, I've got a product, blah, 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 or I've got this service, blah, blah, blah. Can you comment or say if you would be interested, or just vote if you're interested in this product and this sounds like something you would have? Are you in this age category? If you're male, female, if you've got these types of hobbies or whatever, like really try and figure it out. It's really important that if somebody is coming in to do your branding and that kind of packaging, especially for products, that they're doing it in a way that they know exactly who they're targeting, so they can use the right colors, the right patterns, the right fonts, the right imaging. That's all part of it. Like, it's so much deeper than what you think, and I'm not an expert in it at any capacity, but my brother is. He is very good at it, and so he's obviously taught me some little things along the way. But definitely define your target audience. If you don't, you're probably not going to succeed, unfortunately, because targeting everybody just doesn't work. Right. Number 6 out of 10. We're over halfway. So neglecting internal controls. All too often, and this is very much taught in accounting when you're doing your degree, when you're doing your CA study, we get taught majorly about internal controls because obviously being part of an accounting team, you have access to the books, you've got access to the bank accounts, you've got access to payroll, you've got access to change details of invoices and things like that. So it's a huge risk if you fail to neglect internal controls when you start bringing people into your business. Now, obviously, if it's you're not going to steal from you. You can't steal from your own business. You can't do that. But if you get to the point where you're growing and you're bringing people in, make sure you set up rules and controls that not everybody can just access everything. Because I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of people out there who, if they have access to, they will do it. If they can find, and it'll take some time, they'll get used to it, they'll see what happens, and they'll follow and they'll think and they'll be like, they haven't checked this or they don't check this. I wonder if I could get away with that. And all it takes is a couple of little things to click in a person who's willing to do that kind of thing, and they will screw you over. I'm telling you, they will do it. So things like, if you're going to have somebody setting up your payments or entering your invoices for you, now obviously professional accountants are different. I'm not saying that, I don't think there'd be hopefully many professional accountants that would do this kind of thing, but I'm talking if you just get an admin person or whatever, just be aware that if they have access to enter things or edit bank accounts, I know of people, well, I don't know those people, but I know of stories where I've worked and people who have done it where they've changed the bank account on invoices and then they change it to their own one, and then because there's not those controls in place when you make payments to check back to make sure that bank accounts are verified or they haven't been tampered with, that kind of thing, and they have essentially been paying this person and that person's been stealing money. Even being careful or being wary of, if you start getting in, how do I word this? I don't want to say managers in general, but if there's a bonuses tied to performance, that is another thing you would have to be careful of, because if they are up here, this is their level, they're a manager or they have in some capacity control over people that are doing the job, and you as the business owner decide to give them a bonus if they get a 5% increase in sales over the year or something, I don't know, and they are getting towards the end of the year and I don't know, something happens and they're only a few percent away or a couple of points away, people will fudge the numbers. They'll say, oh yeah, put in an accrual for this income. Might not be real income, but they'll put that accrual in, even if it might be a month or two early or something. They'll sneak that in so that they can get their bonus. So just when creating bonus structures for managers, have that control, think that through. We don't want people to be doing that anytime that people have access to enter accounts, change accounts, set up payments, set up payroll. Think through the process, because they could be changing bank accounts, their own bank accounts. They could team up with another person and put through extra payments and payroll if you're not checking that. So pretty much anything that's going out of the bank or in to your accounting software should be verified by somebody else. So if you're coding an invoice, it should be somebody coding or somebody else verifying, yep, we've received the goods or we've received the service. Because they could do up a fake invoice, enter it, and if it's not being approved by anybody, you're just going to set that up for payment, and it's their fake business going to their bank account. So somebody on the ground that's received the goods or the service should be like, yep, tick, we have received that, into the invoice. When you're looking at approving the payments, which I think somebody high up definitely should be the one approving payments, I'd be double checking that the invoices are approved, or you've got the processes in your accounting system where they are approved through a process, and details can't be changed, and then you double check bank accounts and things like that. I could do a whole episode, and I think there may even be an episode somewhere on my podcast. It's been going for so many years that I'm sure I've done an internal controls one. But yeah, there's just a lot, so just think that through when you start getting people in. If you were somebody of bad mind, and just think of if a criminal was to come in and they would try and find any way they could to steal money, think through what they might be able to do and then put a control in place to stop that, essentially. Right, number 7, burnout. So obviously when you're starting a business and you're an entrepreneur and you've got all these ideas buzzing around in your brain, you want to go 100 miles an hour because that's what you want to do. You want to succeed. You want to have this new business in you. You're excited by what you're going to do. But you overdo it because it's just you, because normally that's how businesses start. Then you're going to burn out, and the business may burn out with you. So making sure that, we hear these stories of people, I started at 5 a.m. and I didn't finish until 10 p.m. because I was working all day because it's just me and I've got to succeed and I've got to grow my business. Make sure you still have self-care time built into your plan. Don't overdo it to the point where you're not taking care of yourself. If there's somebody that you can delegate a little bit to, try and delegate a little bit to. So definitely pick the right people to bring in. Feel safe to delegate if you've got those controls in place. Obviously, you want to make sure that those are in place before you start delegating things that could open you up to risk. But have self-care built into your plan. Make sure that you're nourishing yourself. You're getting a little bit of exercise as often as you can. Don't overdo it. Make sure you get enough sleep, drink enough water, all those basic things. Because if you burn out, your business will burn out, because at the start, you're the main one who knows everything. You're the one with the vision. You're the one that has the passion to get it going. You're the one normally doing everything. So definitely just take the time to self-care, delegate if you do have some people that have the controls in place and you feel comfortable, and get those right people in that can help you feel comfortable enough to hand those things off to, okay? Number 8, scaling too quickly. So and we've seen it time and time again, where I normally find it in tech businesses, or I hear it about it in tech businesses, where they've just grown exponentially because tech is a huge area of growth, and they've come in, they've got a great idea, they grow huge, and in that growing process, they've failed to kind of put the right structure for their team in place. And it means that when you get up to this point, you've got all this mess that you threw it together as you grew because you needed it so quickly. You just grew so quick that then you have to unwind all of this mess from the time that it took you to get up here, and you're still trying to grow. So while you're trying to grow, you're trying to undo all this mess, and it just becomes a bit of a headache. And I used to work in a place that did grow really, really quick over a few years. I don't even know if may have been around for like 10 years-ish, 10, 11 years. And it was just a complete mess. Everything was just rushed. The people that were in there at the time had just done things that made it work for them, but there were so many people coming in and out of the business employee-wise, like a lot of high turnover. And so notes weren't being passed on, and nobody had the time even to make up process notes or know how to do things. So then critical processes got skipped or missed, or they didn't know how to do it, and nobody knew the data flows, and then it causes this whole big mess. So if you are scaling too quickly, just try to put time aside to work through that and think through things, and don't rush the quickliness of the scaling. If it's cool that you're growing, that's awesome, but try and figure out a plan to kind of make it grow in a sustainable way, because if you shoot up way too fast, chances are you're going to fall just as quick because you've left all this mess behind you. So just try and think it through, get the right people in, and try to just research how to scale at a more sustainable rate for yourself and your business. Number 9 is ignoring technology and automation. Well, this kind of relates to the other one, or like the technology point that I just made, which is technology businesses just coming out of nowhere and just growing. I mean, a few years ago, I hadn't even heard of ChatGPT, and now I seem to hear about it all the time, and people are using it for all sorts of things, and, doing assessments and whatnot. You didn't have a place that you could go and ask a question to, and now students, I'm hearing, they are asking ChatGPT or whatever, and they're giving them the answers to these assessments. Or I heard about lots of people struggling that their assessment has been, gone into the checking before it gets submitted, and it says that it's 95 or 85% AI written, and they're like, no, I read it myself, because there's just so much out there that people are researching and putting into there, and if you're not using it, then you're going to lose it. And so because technology is growing so much, if you fail to use and utilize technology and automation, and everybody else around you and your competitors are using it, then you might fall behind, because they're going to be able to do things a lot quicker than you if you aren't using that. So try to find the ways that you can implement technology in a safe way. Good thing is just having one of those chat bots on your website, or using it to streamline a certain process or a certain operation that normally you would have to do manually. There's lots of different apps out there, and things like even just email campaigns. You set some things up and then it just sends it out for you, instead of having to send a bunch of emails off to people. That just lots and lots of basic things that are now being able to be automated like that. So yeah, definitely do some research into whatever your business is, and how automation and how other competitors are using technology and automation to kind of ease things for you. And the last one is failure to adapt. So I have talked about this one again so much on my podcast. Honestly, I feel like it's rinse and repeat for so many things in business, because there's just so many rules and so many things that you need to think about. But if you don't adapt, and this comes into the technology one as well, if you're not willing to give the new things a go or change the way you're doing things to adapt to the market, you're probably going to fall behind or go out of business, because everybody around you, if they are sticking up with what's going on in the trends and the technology, they're going to fly past you and people are going to go to them. So be aware that yes, you may have a really cool idea to start off with as an entrepreneur, and you're like, oh, this is a really cool idea, and nobody's doing it. 5 years down the line, you might have a bunch of competitors that are all doing the same thing, and if you fail to keep up with the innovations that they're doing, then your people are going to jump over to them, because even though you started it, that doesn't mean that you've got customers forever, and it doesn't mean that you're the one who people are going to go to for that product. Just because you started it, people aren't loyal as customers as much as they were. So people aren't scared to jump to different competitors. So just because you were the first one doesn't mean that somehow you're exempt to having to adapt and keep up with your competitors that may then surpass you. So just making sure that you've got either some newsletters that you subscribe to, or you're just doing some research quite often into the market that you're in, and keeping an eye on your competitors and what they're doing, and different technology that might be coming up that can help you or change the way you do business, and just being open to that, to being adaptable and to adapting to new things. Because if you don't, the world is going to move on without you, and your business will fail essentially. So it's just a thing of business. If you don't, you think of digital cameras, nobody really uses them anymore. The iPhones came out, so you've got to rescale what you're thinking. Video stores, DVDs came in, they had DVD stores, but then everybody went to just having, subscription online. So if you don't think things through like a Netflix did, where they went from a video or DVD store to actually doing everything online in this online space, they were able to succeed from that. So just think of things like that and change the way you do business to keep up with what the customers are wanting and the market is wanting. And that was my last point for this episode. So thank you for tuning in. If you're still here, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening for this slightly longer episode. I'm still learning about this whole video space, so I definitely plan on getting better and maybe even getting some help in the next few months to try and make it even better than what I can do, because obviously it's not my area of expertise. But I hope you've learned a couple of things from this episode that you can take away and apply to your business, or if you're thinking about starting a business, have these things in the back of your mind as things to remember. And I will chat to you guys in the next one. See ya!